Hey guys, and welcome back. The other day I started my Golf R and it sounded a little bit like this. Actually, it was a little bit worse than that, and it was the rattle from my timing belt. I bought this car a few years ago with full service history, but I've never seen anything about the timing belt, so I don't know if it's been done. So I'm not gonna take any chances because in a few days I have to take this thing to a 2-day autocross to hopefully win. Stay tuned for that, we'll see. But this DIY, I know I'm not much of a DIY guy. I don't do a lot of DIYs, but everybody should know how to do a timing belt. And this will apply to anything in the US from like 2006 to 2009 when it comes to GTIs, GLIs, etc. Passats, anything with a 2.0T in those years. And in my case, on a 2013 Golf R, because I know it says TSI on here, but it's actually an FSI because it's the stronger engine, and that's why I put it in there. Doesn't matter. Let me show you the tools. Let me show you what you need to do, and we'll try to knock this out in 10 minutes, maybe less. I'm gonna aim for 10. It's probably gonna end up being like 15 because I'm a failure. And don't mind me sweating. It's extremely hot today, so I really don't wanna be doing this today. I'm sweating like a whore in church. I gotta get this done because in a few days we're going racing. As for tools and parts you'll need, and don't mind me using this, my workbench is taken up by a transmission being taken apart. That will probably be in a future video. Here is kind of what you need. I bought this timing belt kit from ECS Tuning. It's about $230 or something like that, and it comes with a new Serpentine belt, obviously the timing belt, a fancy little sticker so you could know when you did it or whoever you sell the car to, some idlers, the tensioner itself, a water pump, hardware, crank seal here. When it comes to tools, obviously you'll need some jack stands because we're gonna have to get this thing up in the air. And actually I just bought these because my jack stands are currently underneath that, which will be another video in the future, but they're kind of fancy. I got these from Harbor Freight and they have like a secondary locking pin here. And I kind of like that. I think they had a lawsuit a while back of jack stands collapsing, so they improved their design. I'm not sponsored by Harbor Freight, but I thought these were pretty cool, and they were like $45 plus tax. Same thing with ECS Tuning. Not sponsored by them either, but either of them, if somebody's watching, hit me up. I gladly will take a sponsorship. You'll need some Torx bits, a 6 and an 8 Allen, a multi-point 9mm flathead screwdriver, some sockets, some wrenches, and some torque wrenches. I'm sure there will be something else. If I come across it, I'll pause and update the video on other tools you may need. So first things first, we're gonna get it up in the air and we're gonna remove all the plastics, the wheel on this side, and we're gonna clean up this whole area. The Bentley manual would tell you have to remove these fuel lines to get this bracket out because your timing belt's right here. You don't have to, we're gonna shortcut this. So intake's gonna come off. We'll have to remove this washer bottle and the coolant bottle, and we'll have to drain the coolant out because I'm doing water pump as well. We'll do that on a low radiator hose, so make sure you also have some extra G13 coolant. Once I get this off, I'll update the next step. All right, so we got the intake off, and if you are cool and you have an aftermarket intake, then you're already ahead here. You don't have to take these off. We got the coolant bottle off. I'll show you how I drain the coolant here in a moment. This is loose because obviously this engine mount is gonna have to come out. We still gotta just take this bracket off right here and take the belt off, and we'll start with that. On the bottom side, we took off all the plastics. Once you have this one off and it's just a handful of Torx, you could take this hose off right here, and that's right there. And you just pull the hose off, drain it into a bucket, make sure you have some extra, and we could get to everything. We'll get it to TDC here in a moment. I'll show you how. Quick disclaimer, if you grenade your car because you do this wrong or try to kill yourself by not using jack stands, that's on you. I'm not responsible for that, but a smart suggestion is put the wheel underneath the car in case everything goes wrong somehow. A wheel is a lot cheaper than your life. Another suggestion is have one of these handy, and it's just like a pick, and when you're going to get hoses off, you could get behind the hose and break it loose without breaking the neck off of this or damaging the hose. And another tool I didn't mention, but obviously you need some pliers to get all the clamps off of this noise pipe, as they call it, intake, coolant hose clamps, things like that. Next, we're gonna take the belt off and tensioner, and if you have a 5/8 wrench, this is actually that exact size. You could pull this guy back, throw that pin in there, and we're going to take our belts off, and then we'll get to getting the motor mount off and the cover. I didn't have the pin, but you could just use a small Allen, and I shoved that in there. Now we're going to take this tension off. It's got, I believe, 3 bolts, 1, 2, and then 1 on the bottom. And then one more tool that I haven't showed you that is here. You need a paint marker of some sort. I have yellow, white, and pink. We'll take off these top bolts, this one, and then we'll have to take this bracket off, which is a pain, but we're going to lift up the engine to make it easier to get to all the bolts. We'll get the tensioner off and we'll get the motor mount off, and then I'll update you there. All right, so we got most of the motor mount out. Now we got to get this bracket out, and the engine is raised up. Just don't go too crazy. You don't want to damage your boost pipes, but this way you could get to it. There's a bolt here, there's one here, and then there's one all the way at the bottom there, kind of where this boost pipe is. All right, so this bracket is the one that people struggle with the most, and it really isn't that bad. Once you have the engine up, you could get to most of the bolts pretty easily. I used about this size extension, which ends up being about 2 3/4 of an inch, and that works perfectly. You have enough space to ratchet, and you have enough space to get the bolts out. Second tip that I'm going to give you is make sure you leave the easiest bolt for last. The last bolt you take out, make it the easiest one so the whole thing doesn't come crashing down on your face and whatnot. So we'll get this out and we'll finagle this bracket out of here. In the Bentley manual, it does tell you that you're supposed to remove these fuel lines. That is a lie. All these bolts have different lengths. So I tried to finagle that bracket and I can't, so I got the top cover off, working on the bottom one. So at this point, might as well get the crank pulley off and show you how to set it to top dead center. To set it to top dead center, we're gonna spin the crank bolt and we're gonna do it clockwise. But one thing to note, and this is why I said to watch the whole thing from the beginning, whether you're watching my DIY or any other, is I didn't mention triple squares, because in the past I've seen these be Allens, but they're actually a 10mm triple square. First, we're going to use a 12.19mm and spin the engine to top dead center. Then we'll get the crank pulley off, we'll get that cover off, and then from there we'll be smooth sailing. All right, we'll clean this off and I'll put some paint on here, but this is where the cam gear has to align to top dead center. And that should be easier to see on camera. And we'll rotate the cam gear till we get to top dead center. Here we see the timing mark coming up now. So I marked the timing mark on the cam. You'll see a slash. Obviously I put paint on it so it's a little easier to see. Now we're at TDC. This is perfectly lined up. We could get the rest of the stuff off. So we got the crank pulley off. Something to note, it's got a little key. So make sure when you put it on, you don't damage the key. You line it up to the hole that's in it. You can put a little bit PB, that's what I did to finagle it off. We're gonna get these off and get the cover off and get that engine mount off. And then we'll just have to get the belt replaced and all the tensioners. Sit wrap. We have the motor mount out. It's honestly pretty easy with the engine cover loose. Now we're gonna replace the tensioner, these idler pulleys, the water pump, and reset it to top dead center because it spun a little bit while I was taking the crank pulley off, but all that's gonna get replaced. The timing belt doesn't look bad, but that noise worried me, so we'll get that cranked out here. One thing I added is just a mark here on the crank itself, on the crank pulley, just because there is a mark on the cover, but the cover's off, so I wanted an extra mark just in case this moves or gets knocked for any reason. To release the tensioner, it's just an 8mm Allen, and we just spin her right off. No going back now. Tensioner is loose. I took off the bolt. We'll get it off here. So now we can get the rest of the belt off. But this guy here is pretty much the #1 cause of timing belt failures. Not this one specifically, but any car. Tensioners are usually the first thing to go, not necessarily the timing belt itself. If this guy's loose, it will rattle about, and it could skip a tooth or miss a tooth. I don't know if you're from West Virginia, all the tooths or teeths. Either way, let's get the rest of this replaced. So water pump and all the pulleys are on, and You always want to replace the water pump when you're doing a timing belt, especially because mine here had the original plastic one. You want the metal one, and if you choose not to do it, please punch yourself in the face. I mark everything that has been torqued. As you can see here, we got the tensioner on. It's positioned with the notch in there, and it's time to put on the belt. One thing about putting on the belt, you want to put it on the right side and then tension on the left. Otherwise, it could move you off a tooth. So we have the timing belt on. Obviously, the tensioner is still loose, but when you do this, you want to start here at the tensioner, loop it around your cam gear, make sure this stays at TDC, through the idler, and then over the water pump, and then over this. You want to make sure this, you see how tight this is? You want to make sure this stays tight. You might have to back this up just a notch, otherwise you'll be off by a tooth. So if you back this up counterclockwise by a notch, you will be able to grab it in there and then come back right to your timing mark, tighten it back down, verify up here that it stayed in time, and then after that you loop it the rest of the way into the tensioner. Now we'll get to the tensioner in a second. So now we got the tensioner set and the timing should be perfect. I'll spin it here in a moment, but let me show you and explain to you why it's important to time that correctly. So here's the old tensioner, and essentially you'll see there's an arrow on here. It's kind of hard to see on the old one, but there's an arrow here, and you want that arrow lined up straight up and down to here. You hand tighten this 13mm bolt, set it in place, then spin this with the 8mm Allen until it lines up with this straight up. Then you tighten this to 25 Newton meters, and we should be perfectly timed. Like I said, you want this side to be tight first before you set the rest of it. All right, I spun the engine twice and the timing on it is absolutely perfect. So I'm happy with myself that I got it right the first time. Like I said, remember certain things. Remember to put certain bolts back as soon as you take them out. And remember to get the right side when you're facing this way on the car, lined up and tight first before you set the rest of it. Otherwise, you'll always be off by a tooth. I hope I made it in the 10 minutes. If I didn't, then this is a 15-minute video. Either way, I'm gonna throw this all back together. It's the same as taking it apart, just in reverse fashion. Remember that the motor mount and that lower timing cover have to kind of be friends. They have to come back together at the same time. And then I'm gonna do the cam follower. So thanks for watching. If you guys like these DIYs, I could probably do more. I'm not a DIY guy, but let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Let's go race this thing.